Justine Caruana resigns as Education Minister following damning report. Keith Kembry and Conrad Mitzi banned from entering the United States over significant corruption. And the Gambian worker crushed in an Asha fuel tank identified as Amadou Saweh. All this and more on Lovin Daily. Good evening, Malta and Gozo, and welcome to another episode of Lovin Daily. My name is Yannick Parch, and well, I'm alone today because everyone is out making the most of the Christmas holidays. Not to worry though, we've had a jam-packed day of news, which I'm going to be running you through, starting with the day's main story about the resignation of Justine Caruana from Education Minister. So as I'm sure you're all aware, Education Minister Justine Caruana has been facing calls for her to resign in wake of a damning report by the Standards Commissioner George Hisler. The report essentially found that Caruana had breached ethics when she granted a €15,000 contract to Daniel Bogdanovic, the former international footballer who she is understood to have had an intimate relationship with. The report found, among other things, that Caruana's actions had amounted to an abuse of power and also called for further investigations by the police. However, despite the findings, Caruana has resisted calls for her to resign, with Prime Minister Robert Abela also refusing to take matters into his own hands. That, however, all changed today. So the day started with Caruana receiving a Christmas pudding from one of the country's teachers' union in recognition of her direct order blunder. This was then followed by the PN writing to Speaker Angelo Farrugia urgently requesting that the Standards Committee meet to discuss her ethics breach. By the afternoon, the Office of the Prime Minister had issued a statement announcing that Caruana had resigned. The statement was a very short one-line sentence saying that basically Caruana had met with Robert Abela this morning and had tendered her resignation. After the announcement, the minister, former minister, took to Facebook to declare that she would not be contesting the upcoming election. And despite probably being the first minister to have resigned twice in a single legislature, an undeterred Caruana said that she would be filing constitutional proceedings against the Standards Commissioner over the manner in which he had conducted his investigation. A friendly word of advice to the former minister: when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. On to our next story, which incidentally is also about a couple of politicians that really should have quit when they were ahead. The United States has banned former Minister Conrad Mitzi and former OPM Chief of Staff Keith Kembry from traveling to the country. In a statement this afternoon, the US Department said it had imposed a public designation due to Kembry and Mitzi's, quote, involvement in significant corruption. In their official capacities, Mitzi and Kembry were involved in corrupt acts that included using their political influence and official power for their personal benefit, the State Department said. I really didn't mince their words here. Both men were named in the Panama Papers scandal in 2016, but were retained by former Prime Minister Joseph Muscat after a snap election in 2017. Mitzi and Kembry eventually resigned in November 2019 after the arrest of murder suspect Jorgen Fenech led to the collapse of the Muscat administration. The designation includes both men's wives and children, with the State Department saying it would continue to support efforts to strengthen the rule of law and Malta's democratic institutions. In light of the announcement, Civil Society Republica warned that Malta could no longer serve as a refuge for the corrupt, noting that the United States was taking steps that the Maltese government really should be taking itself. The news was welcomed by many, including by former opposition leader Simon Busuttil, as well as Matthew Caruana Galizia, who insisted that Malta needed to do more to restore its reputation. The designation obviously will come as a blow to Malta's efforts to get itself off the FATF grey list, which is partly due to the fact that the country has been unable or unwilling to properly and effectively prosecute high-ranking corruption. On to our third story. A Gambian worker who was killed yesterday after being involved in a tragic accident while cleaning fuel storage tanks in Hassabtan has been identified as 46-year-old Gambian Amadou Souareh. Members of the Gambian community as well as other migrant communities all sent in their condolences after the shocking incident. The man died, it seems, while he was crushed while working in this fuel tank. He was for some reason in between the cabin of a cherry picker and the ceiling of the fuel tank, and he somehow ended up getting crushed while working. The news, Lamin Jaiteh, another Gambian worker who was recently involved in a construction site accident and left for dead on the roadside, reacted to the incident by expressing his shock. Speaking to Lovin Malta, he said that the news had been reported in Gambia and had also reached a number of other Gambian communities across Europe. He said he had received calls from friends in Italy and Spain asking whether he knew the man. He said that after hearing the story, he had trouble going to sleep because it brought back memories of his own ordeal. Now, as we said yesterday, we don't have many details about what exactly led to the man's death, though unfortunately it is one of many similar accidents that we've had at the workplace, and one hopes that a proper investigation will be held to determine exactly the circumstances under which the man died, and if there was any negligence on the part of his employers, then one hopes that swift action will be taken immediately. Our next story is time about the COVID-19 pandemic, which doesn't want to go away, it seems. Malta recorded the highest daily tally of new cases over the past 24 hours, with 582 cases registered. This brings the total active cases up to about just under 3,000. The increase was expected, especially given that we're seeing a surge in the pandemic in practically every country across Europe and the world. However, today's numbers have shocked many and left the country bracing itself for the possibility of new restrictions, as we're basically a few days away from Christmas. Malta's Nurses Union, in fact, this morning also warned that Malta Day Hospital was at breaking point, blaming the government's refusal to close bars and entertainment venues for the increase in new cases. The union accused the government of appeasing the entertainment industry at the expense of healthcare professionals. On the other hand, the Association of Catering Establishments has pushed back against the union's claims, urging for more responsible public statements by unions and other stakeholders. The recent surge has divided the country more than ever before, with practically half the population calling for a return to some form of measures to slow the spread, with the other half essentially having had enough of the pandemic and not willing to go back to measures under any circumstances. While the numbers have increased significantly, the silver lining is that hospital admissions have remained relatively low. In fact, as of today, there are a total of 47 people receiving hospital treatment, with just 4 in ITU. Compared to the last time Malta registered over 500 new cases last March, then there were close to 40 people in intensive care alone. Malta's successful vaccination drive has clearly had a positive impact on the course of the pandemic, and one hopes that the government's rollout of booster shots will allow Malta to remain ahead of the curve. That said, if you're going out this Christmas, if you're making any plans, be sure to follow social distancing measures and to abide by all the regulations in place for your own good and for the good of everyone else around you. And this brings us to our final story about an appeal by Malta's biggest TikToker, Henry Gallia, for people to get vaccinated after he lost his stepdad to COVID-19. Henry Gallia, one of Malta's most popular content creators, took to social media this morning with an appeal for the public to take the COVID-19 pandemic seriously after he lost his stepfather to the virus. It was really bad, tearful Gallia said. It attacked him a lot, and all I can say is please be careful and go and get vaccinated. Do whatever you can to prevent it. His father, Enzo Abela, a celebrated carnival enthusiast and artist, died at the age of 52, and so is being remembered for his contributions to the carnival scene over the years, as well as his hardworking character. Gallia admitted that he himself was a vaccine skeptic, but said that his family's experience over the last days had showed him that getting the virus was far, far worse than the vaccine's side effects. He said he completely understood the position of people who were skeptical, but said he now understood that he was wrong about his position. Hopefully Henry's appeal can serve as a lesson to many out there who are still refusing to get vaccinated and who claim that the risks associated with the vaccine are somehow greater than the risks associated with the virus. You know, when you get an opportunity, when you're invited to take the vaccine, go and get it. It's not going to be the end of the world, and it will help the country move out of this COVID pandemic. Our thoughts are obviously with Henry and his family at this difficult time. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. We're going to cut to a trailer to our Dr. Clown documentary. Thank you very much for following, and have an evening full of lovin'.
I love them, I miss them. Since COVID happened, they've not been so present in the world.
The number one rule is if we promise them that we're going, we're going. Because you never promise a child something and take it away from them.
The children here are passing through difficult times. They're in hospital because they're unwell.
Clown doctors are people from all walks of life.
I work on one very clear, ridiculous, fairy assumption. If the child is no longer in hospital, they went home.
I mean, I can see a parade at the moment of the children that I have clowned with.
Seeing that child running in the corridors of the hospital, laughing her head off, that's fantastic.
But the clowns?
There's nothing better in the world than laughing.
Just as important as the medication prescribed by the real doctors.
Thank you, Dr. Clown, so much. I hope you stay in the hospital till the world ends. Literally, you are the best team ever. And you know what they say, laughter is the best medicine.